Sunrise Radio. Sunrise Radio. Playing the best mix of music.
10:14 on a Tuesday morning, not just any Tuesday morning, of course, the 5th of November. You're listening to Sunrise with me, Shabnam Sahi. It gives me great pleasure to say a big warm welcome to the gentleman who started it, who was in this seat where I'm sitting right now in a different place, of course, 30 years ago, hosting the first show on what has turned out to be an iconic station. Dr. Avtar Lit, welcome to Sunrise. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I want you to take us back to that day 30 years ago. Give me a rough idea of the events that led up to you actually thinking, you know what, this is one service missing in the UK. This is what I need to start. And describe to us that first Sunday when you did your first show.
Well, look, it was about the same time, actually, on the 5th of November, just after 10 o'clock, in fact, it started. The journey was a long one, not just for me, but for the entire Asian community, because there was very little in terms of broadcasting in the UK. There was absolutely no television except 25 minutes on a Sunday morning, which was teaching immigrants English and maybe a song. And the main entertainment for the Asians used to be films on Sunday, put in various cinemas. There was nothing on the radio, and there was a chap from Midlands. He started buying an hour a day on commercial stations, and people used to look forward to that. And the BBC had a contribution that they used to have a program at 6 o'clock in the morning on Radio 4, effectively sort of playing for half an hour Asian music. And it was a very different world for the Asians than it is today. Today things are taken for granted, but they were actually hard fought for by the people at that generation 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I think the forerunner to Sunrise was Sina Radio, where were brilliant 4 or 5 people from Southall. They actually, never mind getting paid for broadcasting, they could actually their payment could be for going to jail for actually broadcasting.
Yes.
And now we talk about transmission across the UK. The transmission for Sina Radio was probably about a mile radius at the time.
Yes.
And people used to sort of drive in to the Southall area to listen to their radio. And,
you mean you had to be in a certain geographic location to be able to tune in?
It only used to broadcast about a mile.
Right. That's what you call a really close-knit group of people. Yes.
Now, the reason why it was important is that Britain is very different today than to 40 years ago or even 30 years ago. One of the main reasons I led that gang of 4 or 5 to actually fight for a radio station. There were 2 radio stations on the FM band across London, and the government was telling me there's no more room for any more FM stations. Today there are 30 radio stations on the FM band alone in London. They found the space anyway. The bottom line is that the campaign was started. We set up Sina Radio. We didn't go underground, contrary to, because I met so many people, I met thousands of people who said, oh, we supported you and all the rest of it, And they did by listening, there's no doubt. In fact, we were probably the biggest laughing stock you can possibly imagine from 1980 to 80, 81, 82, 83, 84. With the biggest laughing stock there was, 4 or 5 people going around to Southall Broadway, turning on people's radio, and people thought we might charge them for it. They will say, no, we like listening to tapes, we don't like radio and things like that. Anyway, those are fun days. The reason why Sunrise was important, because the Asian community did not have editorial say, either in print or in broadcasting. And what the government used to do, and the local authorities, they used to use intermediates in order to communicate with the Asian community. So, and some of those intermediates were actually propagandists. Some would be sort of pushing Khalistan business, some would be pushing other agendas and everything else. So by the time the information actually came down to the Asian community, who really were the victims and perhaps the beneficiaries of that information, it was very different to what the authorities had said in the first place.
Yes.
So
Chinese whispers.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of make sure that right information was going to them. And secondly, I felt that until at such time, it was a chicken egg situation. You couldn't become a journalist or broadcaster because you haven't had the training, and nobody was prepared to give you the training. So one of the biggest contribution I think we've seen our radio made is that changed the sound of Asian broadcasting here in America. And then finally, when Sunrise started, the number of broadcasters which we actually trained in journalism who went to do great things on other radio and TV stations. And I think that's the biggest legacy Sunrise did, actually putting journalists into British broadcasting.
And you know what? You're talking about the days leading up to Sunrise actually being Sunrise 30 years ago. Were you holding down other jobs at the time? Because then you had no idea whether your plea for or your petition for having a proper station dedicated to Asians, whether that would come through. And indeed, I'm sure you hadn't dreamt of your station becoming this icon that it did. So was it just passion that was driving you? I mean, were you multitasking? How did it practically work?
Well, basically, I suppose you could say I've probably been a fanatic. I've been a fanatic in anything which I did. And unfortunately, most of my stuff always been sort of 20 years before the public caught on. I came to Southall with a license for cable television in late 70s and early 80s. And we did actually set up a cable network in Southall. And it was an analog system which we had a license for. But, you know, the way the world is, so the government said, cable is a fantastic thing, and we're going to make it digital. The difference between digital and analog was about 5,000%. So we had enough money. I managed to get enough shareholders, put up a cable network, which came to a standstill because they went digital. But of course, now cable is big all over. But we were actually the first people to get a license.
Back in the day.
In London, in London. But the Asian community just didn't have the money. I certainly didn't have it. But the Asian community just didn't have the money. And nor did they actually believe in this airy-fairy stuff in the future. An investment today, profit tomorrow, because the mindset of the most of the Asian community is that profit yesterday, investment today. Therefore, that's the way it was. And there weren't any large sort of Asian corporations. There are some companies which are large now, but then, you know, they weren't sort of, Asians were not doing as well as they did today.
Now, Dr. Lit, you're passionately a radio man. Before we started the interview in the ad break, we were chit-chatting about how radio has now become, television, being on camera has become so much a part of modern day radio, and both of us said we hate it because, you know, it takes away from the mystique of radio and all of that. Your soapbox, away from all the music you played, away from uniting the community and all of that, your soapbox was an iconic show that millions tuned into, because I felt that you were in a position to address issues which people back in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka weren't able to do because of political reasons. But you were not afraid to set the cat among the pigeons, to stir up a hornet's nest every now and then. And that's what I think really made you this iconic personality that you are. How did you do it? Where did you find the courage to have the kind of discussions you did on that show?
Well, I used to make friends Monday to Saturday and lose them all on Sunday morning. and lose them all Sunday morning. It was a ruthless program. It took no prisoners. And the good thing is that a lot of the cabinet ministers, prime ministers of India and Pakistan, they appeared, and a number of other prominent politicians and things, and they were really challenged, the kind of challenge which they didn't face before. And I think sort of public lapped it up, and also the contribution made by the listeners on the phone into those programs was absolutely fantastic, because they were, these days, today's generation of Asians, they haven't seen the hard life. They take everything for granted. But the reality was, life was very different. So those people had experience of life. They could talk about it. And, you know, today on radio, mostly it's about Bollywood, and that's all it is. But the reality, in those days, people used to talk about social issues, political issues, and everything else. And we went through the whole lot, you know. And I was in a unique position that on one side, I don't think you had any demonstrations recently, but I remember the Khalistanis demonstrating, I remember the Muslims demonstrating, the Kashmiri Pundits demonstrating, Kashmiri Muslims demonstrating, and all because they all believed that, you know, they weren't getting, they wanted recognition and anything, and I just didn't believe in those barriers. I thought that, you know, there was nothing out of nothing taboo. Everything could be discussed.
I want to play you a little clip which we've retrieved from the archives. This might take you back some years. Have a listen to this.
A very good morning to you. What a beautiful Sunday morning, 5th of November 1989, 10 a.m. My name's Avtar Lit and this is Sunrise Radio.
Gold rate with Mina. Gold price on average is the highest for 6 years. If you want the best price for your gold, contact Mina Jewelers, the multi-award winning jeweler, on 020-8767-7627.
We may as well give you the gold rate. It's £37.53 per gram. But Dr. Lit, does that take you back 30 years to when you first did the show?
Yes. I mean, I still remember it's just like yesterday, actually. Sort of. It was a wonderful day, and
do you remember the first song you played?
I think I should. It was the same one we actually played back in 1980, 83, 84, 82, 83, launch of Sina Radio. Meri Kismat Mein, I think that was the one. Actually.
I think you're absolutely right, because one listener said, I've been with this station from the day you started. Dr. Lit started with Meri Kismat Mein Tu Nahi Shayad.
Yes.
मैं तेरा इंतजार करता हूँ, कल भी प्यार करता था, अब भी प्यार करता हूँ, right?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. We're going to chit-chat some more, of course. I'm talking to the founder, to the man himself who brought Sunrise Radio into our lives 30 years ago to this day. My name is Shabnam Sahi. This is Sunrise.
The app available from the App and Play Store.